Hi, welcome to Producer's Circle. I'm your host, Gabe Castro. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about creating content with the intent of community care. This program is a part of PhillyCam's People Power Media Fest, which is our annual month-long celebration of community media and our membership. This year, we're focused on sharing the ways our media can be a form of community care. So be sure to catch conversations, workshops, and special programming focused on ways storytelling cultivates care. You can tune in to be a part of the festival on cable, radio, and online. For more information, you can visit ppmfest.org. But let's get into our conversation today with two amazing producers and content creators who are going to share with us how they help promote community care. So I am so happy that you both are joining me, specifically in this conversation about community care, because you both work so closely with your communities and focusing on promoting love or promoting focus on like individual stories that are happening in our community and being told by those who are in that community. So you are both content creators, but are also amazing crew members and support for other creators as well, like having platforms that are allowing others to tell those stories. So thank you both for joining me on this special conversation. I want to introduce you two so that everyone knows how amazing you are and why I asked you here. So I'll start with Jos. Jos Duncan is a multimedia producer, professional storyteller, and social entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience collaboratively creating and documenting community-centered narratives. She is the founder of Love Now Media, an empathy-centered media company that uses storytelling to advocate for social justice and wellness. Welcome, Jos.
Thank you for having me, Gabe.
Yes. And then our other panelist today is Kristal Sotomayor, who is a queer Latinx documentary filmmaker, festival programmer, and freelance journalist. They are co-founder of Presente Media, serve as a programming director at the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival. Currently, Kristal is post-production on Expanding Sanctuary, an independent short documentary about the historic end to police surveillance organized by nonprofit Juntas and the Latinx community, immigrant community in South Philadelphia. And as we were talking about before we got here, we all wear lots of hats. As you can tell, there's a lot of things that you both are working on that is amazing. Like we're so lucky to have the content that you all create in the world. So I wanted to start by just kind of opening up the question of what community care looks like to you. And that doesn't have to be specifically media related, but just like what would that look like ideally?
I work at the International Documentary Association as the awards competition manager, in addition to all the other things. And I would say that for me, community care is really like celebrating who we are as a people, as our diversity, as all of the things that we encompass. So I would say, through my work, it's been really like celebrating Latinx artists and storytellers and really creating a platform and a place for people to be able to express who they are authentically through media, through art, through music, through whatever their kind of the way that they channel and the way that they heal. So for me, community care is just celebrating who we are authentically.
Awesome. How about you guys?
Yeah, for me, community care is creating space for people to listen to each other and to themselves. I think that's where healing starts, is where connection starts. And I think especially after the kind of isolating year that we've had, even if it's creating virtual spaces or spaces where people are invited to collaborate on a document or a digital product, just creating spaces for people to connect is really kind of the start of it. And I think also affirming people, validating people, and helping people to feel seen and heard is a way to care for them.
Yes. I wanted to talk with both of you about specific projects that you work on our organizations that you work with. I wanted to start with Jos with Love Now Media, which is always a pleasure whenever we get to put those on Philly Cam, and I get to see those different stories and to hear the conversations that come from it. And so Love Now Media is that empathy-centered media company that uses storytelling to advocate for justice, wellness, and equity. They produce and distribute content and lead impact-focused conversations and activities that produce outcomes. And I just wanted to talk about, what inspired the creation of Love Now Media, but then also like how, you're doing the work of the community care with Love Now Media. So how can people benefit the most from that work?
Yeah, so Love Now Media really is a concept that was born out of protest. I started Love Now Media in 2016. And from about 2007 to 2015, I had another company, GrioWorks, where I organized a lot of Black storytelling initiatives. So there were storytelling workshops in communities, storytelling festivals, cultural competency workshops. But in that, a lot of community members started to look to me to document what was happening in Black communities. So oftentimes, the news wouldn't show up for things that the community really cared about. And so as a filmmaker, as a documentarian, as someone who was invested in the community and as someone with media skills, I would show up to places and help to tell those stories. And I think with the evolution of YouTube and multimedia platforms where the work could be shared, I really kind of became known for showing up at these things. So at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, when things really first started to build a lot of traction in around 2013, 2014, I was showing up at a lot of protests and I found myself feeling unwell, emotionally unwell. I was triggered by a lot of what was happening. I was connecting what I was seeing happening, in the media to things that I knew about and had experienced in my community. And I became exhausted and I felt like I could not continue that work. And a local community member organized a rally for Black girls. And I showed up at that and I said, I cannot approach this looking for pain. I need to look for the love. And it just so happens that at that particular rally, there was so much love there. There were people who brought their children out. There were women wrapping their heads with these beautiful fabrics. And I literally shifted, my lens to that. And out of realizing what I felt as a storyteller, how my investment in the work shifted and how I was invigorated simply by shifting my lens, I knew that I was onto something. And so Love Now Media was founded. I started with, just myself and my camera, finding stories that looked and felt like love, primarily for, Black and people of color. But there were also folks that white folks who were doing loving things in our communities. And so I started documenting those and just really building out an ideology, a methodology. And then we started doing storytelling workshops. And from that came a framework that I was able to share with others. So in the last year and a half, we've been able to extend that methodology to newer filmmakers and people who had stories to tell, but maybe didn't have the documentary skills or the camera crew or the equipment. And we've helped them to tell new stories. So it feels like an act of love to do that. Exactly. Is helping people to see a reflection and representation of themselves. And it's also giving people, the agency in telling their own stories.
Yeah, it's super important that when we are focused on telling our stories that we do take the time to celebrate and love what we're doing and love each other. And so often when our stories are shown, it's always the negative ones or the ones where we're trying to highlight awful things that are happening in our communities instead of stopping and appreciating who we are and the community that we have. So I'm always appreciative of these stories that we get to do that, because it's like you have to remind people to just stop and appreciate what is happening around us and to love one another. And I think it's amazing that you're helping other people focus on those stories too, which ties into, what Kristal was saying about, community care is celebrating, right? Is celebrating each other and our culture and who we are. So thank you. I think that's great. It's perfect answer. So I want to also go over to Kristal about Presente Media, which you are a co-creator of and work on. And so Presente Media, their mission is to produce bilingual journalistic articles and documentaries focused on social justice. They address issues such as racial and immigrant justice, education equity, culture, and gender and LGBTQ equality. So can you tell us about, your involvement with Presente Media and how you hope that you can use this as an outlet and a form of community care?
Yeah. So I'm one of the co-founders of Presente Media, along with Melissa Beatriz and Gabriela Watson-Burkett. And, we're all Latinx, and we just started talking at the beginning of the pandemic about how, there's really, first of all, a lack of, career options for filmmakers and journalists of color in the city. And also the fact that a lot of our community stories are going really untold, especially during the pandemic when most of the resources coming out from the city to support people were in English. So what do communities that only speak Spanish do when they can't access these COVID resources that are really, life and death? So that's kind of why we began this, is because we wanted to provide an outlet and a space for people in our community to be able to tell their own stories and to see their stories being told. So we mostly work in audio-visual kind of storytelling, so through articles and videos. And so we have on our website, presentemedia.org, we have all different types of stories that touch on mostly immigration, but also LGBTQ rights. We have this Latinx Ancestors Project that talks about different issues happening in the Latinx queer community. And we're also, doing different videos that support the different issues that are happening in the community. So not only can you read about it, but you can also see the people who are doing the work. And I'll say that, all of this came out of our love for our community and the fact that there was this vital resource that was missing. And we hope to continue to tell these important stories. And we've had some really amazing collaborators, including Gabe, who has written a few articles for us. And we're just trying to highlight the really untold stories that typically people, don't ever get a chance to be able to express the amazing things that they're doing in the community. So I would say that that's really our mission and vision and what we hope to get out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so important for representation, what you're seeing of yourself, right? Or what people look like you, right? And if, you have people who are telling those stories from their community, from that lens, you're just going to get amazing content from it. And you're going to be able to connect to your community in that very authentic way that I appreciate with Presente Media, which is why it's a delight to work with you. I also wanted to talk about ways that, so we're creating content and we're getting information out and celebrating one another, but what are ways outside of a production, maybe we highlight some issues or we take a moment to love, but what else can we do? What are the next steps for people who want to better care for their community? How do we continue that work?
I think we really try to uplift folks, following doing work with Love Now Media. We try to create new opportunities. So with our programs, there are people who have submitted to an open call for stories who then became part of the film crew, who then, became producers of projects. And so it's finding new ways to engage people. To keep them connected to this idea that through love, there's healing, there's wellness, and there's the power to make an impact in their own community. So I think we create a lot of opportunities for folks And we also, I think, trust the process, the learning process. I think we're all learning. As a leader, I'm constantly learning. And so if you look at our team, a lot of the folks who work with the Love Now Media team are doing jobs maybe that it's their first time doing, but they've trained in other areas. And I think in like a larger corporate setting, they may have had to go through a number of ranks to hold a director position or to hold a managerial position. Whereas me, I'm like, you've been doing this work, you've been investing. So how about we, just kind of elevate you, give you an opportunity to play or explore new ideas or to manage a small budget. So I feel like that speaks to the equity, again, that we advocate for. But for me, it feels also like it's important to be the type of organization that is equitable, that creates opportunities for workers and creators and lovers, healers, artists, activists to also have access to that same equity when they're working with us.
Educating them and giving them those tools then allows them to do the same to someone else, and then it spreads. Yeah. It's like, no, everyone can do it, which is amazing. Awesome. What about you, Kristal?
Yeah, I mean, I think throughout, making a film, for example, there are many like opportunities to provide community care. Like in production, you can hire crew from the community, you can have them be front and center in front of the camera. You could have them write. You could also do in post-production, rough cut screenings. That's something that I really like to do. And you can have, key community partners that provide insight. But I think, once you're done with a project, something that's really important is an impact plan and making sure that you have a really clear vision for how your film can support the community, whether it's a specific issue or topic. Like for me, it's really like in Expanding Sanctuary, it's like legislation, like how do we change legislation? And so coming up with a plan that can mobilize people around a particular issue is I think really important. And that's a way to give back to the community, because not only are you creating a piece of art and maybe documenting a really important moment for the neighborhood, but you're also then providing resources specifically to tackle this issue in the long term. So I think really having a clear plan for what you want a particular community or a particular neighborhood to get out of the project, and then putting those steps together and with involvement
yeah.
To inform how you go about those processes. I think that would be my my recommendation for folks after they've finished a film and they're trying to figure out what's the next step.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially when you're dealing with some of those heavier topics, that you are highlighting issues in the community, and you're educating, like, here's what's happening, here's what's going on. But it's important to give those next steps, to have those like solutions, or like so people can feel empowered, right? Because it's like, okay, now I've made you aware. Here's how you can change that, or here's how you can support the people around you, so you're not just feeling bad, you're feeling instead eager to change it, right? The impact plan is a great way to do that. What are, I'll go back to you, Kristal. What are some concerns that you have in some of the communities that you would like to see better represented in the media?
Well, something that I'm really trying to work on is kind of thinking and expanding the idea of like the prison industrial complex and how that also affects like immigrant communities, because a lot of people don't think that ICE and detention centers are part of the prison industrial complex, but they are. Like police interactions can directly lead to a detainment or a deportation, and those processes directly are, come from the prison pipeline, they're really similar. Police officers and DHS agents dress really similarly, have a lot of the same equipment in the end, a lot of the same training. DHS officers think that they're police officers. Police officers think that they're DHS, So, in the end, there's a lot of friendliness in those agencies. Detention centers are a little bit modeled after prisons, like the way that they just segregate people and put people away. That's what I think is really misrepresented. They're kind of seen as two different things when they're really like more interconnected than I think we can even possibly imagine. Like, I'm sure some of the funding, who knows, maybe there's like for-profit, detention centers that are owned by people who have for-profit prisons. Like, it's just, I think that there's a lot more that can be explored there. And I think there needs to be more serious investigations into everything, that whole process, even like the equipment that they use. Cause that's kind of what my film is about like the fact that they share a database, like the Philadelphia police database was being shared with ICE, and that happens throughout the country. So if they're just sharing that one database and they have access to that, what else do they have access to? Like, what else do they share? I think it's a little scary to think about that, but that's what I think needs to be investigated more deeply and looked into.
Great. Like having that same anger and outrage that we're seeing with prison abolition towards just abolishing ICE as well, right?
Just like the collaboration, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't work separately on, ending, abolish, ending Burks, like, I think that they've done like a really good job in Philly of really merging the two and being like, actually, shutting down this prison is directly aligned to shutting down Burke's detention.
Yeah.
Like, I think there needs to be more of that nationally. And I think that's the biggest, that's, in my opinion, that's a huge issue that's affecting like immigrant communities in this country. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. But.
No, I'm glad. That's why I brought you, and that's why you have the platforms that you do. And I agree that it is super important. And like, we're stronger together, right? Like, we have common goals, and especially if those things are is so connected, and we're not hearing about that and realizing that, it just contributes to us not being able to help it, right? But we can work together to make a difference.
El pueblo unido.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. What about you, Jos? What are some issues and concerns in your community that you would like to see better represented?
I would like to see more systems design. I feel like so many people and like funders and institutions at this point, people are putting a lot of money and attention into Black stories about trauma, about harm. And of course, it's necessary because people need to understand the effects of systemic racism in this country. But I feel like there's not enough attention on designing and defining systems that actually work. I feel like so many of our narratives, from TV shows to movies, are really about oppression, and it's about trying to address oppression, trying to dismantle oppression. But I feel like there's been almost like a suffocation of Black imagination. I think there needs to be more opportunities for Black youth in particular to dream and to think about the kind of community they want to live in, without a 12-year-old having to constantly talk about gun violence or the hardships that they've experienced. And I feel like funders are often, giving out money to the most, disadvantaged narratives. Like, we know that kids are disadvantaged. We know that people are having a hard time right now. But I feel like the more we talk about that, the more it like kind of fans the fire of, we've been so oppressed. And with that, there are people who seem to be losing their fire for rebuilding, redesigning, and thinking of new ways to build community. And I just want to shout out, I'll say Rashida Phillips and Kamei, because I think that what they're doing with this Afrofuturism is so profound, because it really speaks to systems that need to work, imagination, and finding ways to bridge some of the gaps that exist. And it doesn't focus so heavily, like a lot of their work doesn't focus so heavily on just constantly talking about oppression, trauma, marginalization, which again, for white folks, is necessary because I feel like they kind of didn't get the memo that those things were happening.
Yeah.
But I think within, Black communities in particular, it's, for me, I think it's challenging to see that so many of our narratives and stories are expected to be about the harm that's been done or that is being done, or, we are in a position to really redesign things or to think about that design and be presenting that along with the plans to dismantle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of focus on Black pain or BIPOC pain, right? And when so much of it is being represented, and that's all we're seeing, and you have that kind of like media literacy, in it, and thinking of like, who is this for? At one point, it's like, okay, we know, like we're aware of what these issues are, like we've live this. And at one point it's like, we're tired. Like we have to live that every day. And now we have to see it as well. And it just benefits us and others as well. If that's all they're seeing, is that pain, then that's the only, if that's the only way that they know those people, then it's a very skewed understanding. Like they need to know that we have celebrations. They need to know that we have love and that there is more to us than our pain. And suffering too. But I agree that there's a lot of programming and funding that's going towards a lot of that. And I think it might be coming from a place of guilt, right? Of being like, oops, we haven't been paying attention to the right things. And now they're overcompensating with that. And instead of actually, contributing or helping and elevating those voices, we're just contributing to the same narratives by highlighting only those stories, right? Instead, we want to educate and then give next steps, right? We want to also take a moment to celebrate and love each other, which is why what both of you are doing is amazing. What are you working on that's coming around the corner that they could look out for and ways to get more information about you? I'll start with you, Jos.
Yeah, so one of the exciting things that we're working on, in addition to distributing the 7 films which were recently produced through Just Love Stories and working on our impact plan, but we're also doing a lot of workshops this fall. I mean, at this point, we've helped people to craft hundreds of love stories in communities. And we're finding that as people are wanting, especially like corporations are wanting to diversify their staff, their ideas, their views on things, that our love storytelling workshops are a great way to deepen empathy and connect people in spaces that are looking to really expand their diversity efforts. So people can sign up for those workshops at lovenowmedia.com. We're also going to be doing a public call for love stories. And so we're looking for love stories that are about work stories that are inspired by love. And so that call will be going out at the top of September. So keep an eye on our Instagram, and the public will be able to talk about how some kind of love, family love, community love, something they saw or felt passionately about, how that led to what they do for work. And so that project is called Be, Do, Love. So look out for those 3 things.
Awesome. And what about you, Kristal?
Yeah, so you can check out presentemedia.org. We have a lot of different stories, and we're going to be releasing some more very soon. So you can check it out there. You can also follow us on social media. And then I would say I'm also, hoping to wrap up Expanding Sanctuary in the next year. And, I'm also working on this film called Alex Through the Labyrinth that is about the non-binary COVID experience. It's this magical realism meets Alice in Wonderland animated film. So you can check those out, and you can follow me on IG, just Kristal Sotomayor, my full name.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again so much for talking about your programs in community care. And thank you all for watching The Producer's Circle. We have another episode, so make sure that you check that out as well, where we'll hear from our fellow PhillyCam producers who are creating content that is also community care. And check out ppmfest.org for more information about the People Power Media Fest. Thank you.